Good morning, Year 11. I hope you've had a lovely half term and had a really good break. I'm super excited that the prospect of actually having you back in my classroom in 2 weeks' time. Let's hope Boris doesn't change his mind. Hey, so we're going to do a little bit of Lady Macbeth revision for the first 2 lessons this week. Then we'll move on to paper 2, question 4 revision. And we're also going to have a Teams lesson on Thursday, so make sure that you're online for that. So to start off with a quick do now. So how is the character of Lady Macbeth presented in Macbeth? Write down a quotation to support this. So can you remember any of the quotations that we looked at during the play that are about Lady Macbeth? And how would a Jacobean audience respond to her, and why do you think that? Okay then, so hopefully you gave yourself a little bit of time to have a think about those questions. So how is the character of Lady Macbeth presented in Macbeth? Well, there's aspects of her being typical and there's aspects of her being atypical, isn't there? She's quite an odd character in the sense that we never really we're never really sure which true side of her we're seeing at one point in the play. And even though in the beginning she presents herself as, wanting all of these masculine values and wanting to be the strong head of the house, actually towards the end it kind of, gets the better of her and she ends up committing suicide. So write down any quotations to support this. So you could have had spirits unsex me here. You could think about dashing the babe's brains out. You could think about be the serpent underneath the innocent flower. You could have thought about give me the daggers. There's lots of quotations that we've thought about for Lady Macbeth, but obviously today we're going to do a little bit more work on that. So if you are struggling for quotes, don't worry. And how would a Jacobean audience respond to her? Well, remember that Jacobeans were part of a patriarchal society. Women were supposed to be wives and mothers. That's all they were supposed to be. They shouldn't have been controlling what was happening in a household. They shouldn't have been controlling what the man did. So the way that Lady Macbeth acts is actually quite controversial, and a Jacobean audience wouldn't really be keen on her because of all of the things that she does. So what I've done today is I've picked out a couple of key quotations that I'd like you to try and remember for Macbeth, okay, specifically Lady Macbeth. And for each of those quotations, you're going to do either a mind map or a list. So there's 4 questions that I want you to be thinking about for each of the quotations, okay? So I'd like you to first of all think about, what does this quotation tell us about Lady Macbeth? Then I'd like you to look at the highlighted words in green, and I want you to tell me what they suggest. Then I want you to think about how a Jacobean audience would be responding to her at that point in the play. And then also contextually, how does it link or go against Jacobean values, gender and stereotypes? So on each of the following slides, there's a quotation and then there's these 4 questions. You need to answer the questions specifically about that quotation, okay? Okay then, so hopefully you've given yourself some time to have a think about this quotation. So out, damn spot, out. So what does this quotation tell us about Lady Macbeth? Well, it tells us that she's becoming quite insecure in her feelings. Previous to this in the play, she's obviously been quite a secure and strong character, mainly wanting to take over the masculine roles that Macbeth can't handle. But at this point, we see her starting to go down this route of hysteria and obviously of hallucinating. So what do the highlighted words in green show us? So out, out. It's the idea that she's got that metaphorical blood on her hands and she wants to get it out. She wants to get rid of the guilt. So contextually, how does this link or go against Jacobean values, gender stereotypes? So obviously we know that she's gone against stereotypes by being involved in the murders, and that's why now she feels guilt. Obviously, if we're thinking about God, God is essentially punishing her for doing something wrong, for committing treason, and that's why she's now facing these hallucinations. So how would the Jacobean audience be feeling and why? Well, in terms of this, the Jacobean audience wouldn't feel much sympathy for her because obviously they've seen her commit these sins and now they realise that she's being punished by God. However, you may also feel a little bit of sympathy for her because of the fact that she's a female and obviously she felt like she needed to prove herself because of her gender. So make sure you've got plenty of notes about that quotation and then we'll have a quick go through the others as well once you've had a go at them. Okay then, so next quotation, are you a man? So what does this quotation tell us about Lady Macbeth? Well, it tells us that she's being atypical, doesn't it? She is questioning Macbeth's masculinity, okay? Which we know during this time period was not acceptable. Women were not supposed to question their husbands. They were supposed to listen to them and obey, and Lady Macbeth is not doing that. So what does the highlighted word in green suggest to us? Well, the highlighted word is the question mark, isn't it, in this? And it's the fact that she dares to question Macbeth about his masculinity, the fact that she's bringing it back to these masculine values, which were everything that men upheld at that time, and she's daring to question him. So again, kind of emphasising that atypical feature that she dares to speak out against her husband. Contextually, how does it link? Well, we've already spoken about the fact that women were supposed to just be mothers and wives. You know, there should not have been any of this questioning going on. And again, a Jacobean audience wouldn't like her very much. She's going against the gender stereotype. She's going against her husband, which were two things that should absolutely not happen. And that's obviously led to these kind of negative qualities being upheld in her. So again, make sure that you've got plenty of notes down on this quotation, and then we'll move on to the next one. Okay then, so this quotation, give me the daggers, all right? It comes a little bit earlier than the previous two that we've had a look at. So this tells us that Lady Macbeth wants to take over from the murder that Macbeth has committed. So obviously Macbeth comes out of the chambers still carrying the daggers. Lady Macbeth notices that that wasn't part of the plan, and she says she'll go and put them back because he's basically been incompetent and not followed the plan. What does it have? The word highlighted in green, so give me. So we know that obviously she's the female. We know that she is clearly going to take control of the situation, which is something we wouldn't expect. But it's also the fact that she's not afraid of committing the sin, which obviously tells us quite a lot about her as a character. Again, it's going against Jacobean values and gender stereotypes because she is taking control of the situation where Macbeth should be, but also the fact that she's committing murder. It's not something that we would expect from females. They were supposed to be gentle, kind creatures, and obviously Lady Macbeth is not being that. And again, the Jacobean audience wouldn't like Lady Macbeth. You know, she's going against gender stereotypes. She's going against everything that society had taught them about women, and then that's going to be reflected in how the audience feel towards her. Okay then, so the next quotation, come you spirits and sex me here. So we had quite a long and lengthy conversation about this quotation, so this is just a quick recap for you. So what does this quotation tell us about Lady Macbeth? Well, the idea is that she wants to be turned into a male so that she can have more power within society. We know that during this time it was a patriarchal society, so women didn't have much say, they didn't have much control. Lady Macbeth essentially feels that she would be better than Macbeth is being. Also, the highlighter words in green on sex me here, it's about taking that femininity away, which isn't something we would expect from a female, but it's also the link to the spirits as well. So she's asking supernatural elements to kind of take control of her and de-sex her in this way, which again is something that the Jacobean audience wouldn't like because they weren't very keen on the supernatural, and therefore that would create a dislike for her. And obviously in terms of your context, you can think about the supernatural and the links to that, but also gender stereotypes as well. One final quotation then, and then this is the end of the lesson. Obviously the idea of this lesson was just to recap some of the key quotations to do with Lady Macbeth. So act like the innocent flower but be the serpent underneath it. Again, you should know this, we've done it lots of times, but it's just a case of reminding yourself. So what does this quotation tell us about Lady Macbeth? Well, it shows us that she's dishonest and she wants Macbeth to behave in the same way. She's telling him to act like he's the loyal servant on the outside, but actually underneath to plan the treason against King Duncan. And this idea of being a serpent, we link to the idea of Adam and Eve and obviously snakes being evil, and obviously the idea that she's almost poisoning Macbeth, so she's almost leading him down this dark path to hell. And again, contextually, we'd be thinking about the links to heaven and hell and purgatory. Obviously, they were highly religious, the Jacobeans, and the fact that she is saying to pretend to be one way and to act another would have been frowned upon because they, believed in being your true self all of the time. And again, a Jacobean audience weren't fond of her. She technically goes against everything that they would expect of a female, every single quotation that we've looked at this lesson. So she's not well liked in terms of her character. So that is the end of today's lesson. Make sure you've got notes on all of those quotations because you don't know what will be coming up in an assessment. Also, make sure that you answer the Show My Homework quiz.